practical nurse. Visit stone.edu.
Hey, welcome back to the show, folks. 4 years ago, Mike Harrington weighed 400 pounds. He was obese, unhealthy, and unhappy. He finally had enough and set off on a journey of healthy living. Eventually, he lost 200 pounds. He was explaining this journey, how he went from obese to having sort of a, charting down all your meals, figured out when you were having problems. But then you mentioned there was some trauma in your childhood that as you looked at yourself, you realized that you ate when you were stressful, and that stress was tied sometimes to a very traumatic childhood. Right. What you can get into, but walk us through what you were able to reconcile from a traumatic childhood.
Well, I had to learn that it was to essentially love myself and not blame myself for my past. And I think getting past some of that, even when I lost the weight, I found that I was still unhappy with myself. And that's
why is that? Why?
I think that I didn't know where I was supposed to be. I was obese majority of my adult life, and I really didn't know where I was supposed to be. And when I got down there, I wasn't sure if it was over. And I pushed myself, thinking that I had to go further, and I just found that I was healthy. I didn't need to keep going.
So when did you start seeing results? You had your meal plan, you had your diary, right. You started replacing good food. Right. Putting in good food, taking out bad food. What kind of good things did you start eating? What kind of things did you have to?
That's a great question. And it was gradual. It's not like I just started eating healthy food right away. I started sneaking them into my foods. So if I had eggs, I put spinach in them. For lunch, if I made whatever, chili, I threw in a bunch of vegetables into that. But I was always trying to get my body used to eating some of these things so that over time, it became more.
So small habits over a period of time.
Exactly.
Right, and eventually you were able to lose 200 pounds in, you say, 11 to 12 months. That's extraordinary.
It is.
So how did you accelerate the pace? How did you go from saying, hey, I'm losing a few pounds to how did that accelerate?
First off, I didn't expect that to happen. All I knew is I wanted to go from point A to point B to get healthy. What started to happen was several months in, the physical aspect started to change. And people were coming to me and saying, wow, what are you doing? And, I remember I started putting it on Facebook and people were making comments. And one guy said, holy, you know what?
Right.
So as that became more evident and I started to learn how to make it happen, I pushed myself more, cutting back on how much I ate, eating more vegetables, getting more exercise, changing it up, increasing it.
So vegetables and exercise and positive reinforcement. You're now looking better. You're getting that feedback. And now for someone who struggled with self-esteem, you were starting to have better self-esteem. So all these things were kind of happening all at once, right? To the point where you lost 200 pounds doing this, right? And people may think that that's crazy, right? 200 pounds in 11 months.
It is.
But here's the reaction. Your mother had not seen you for a few years, right? And she lived out in where she lived in Arizona?
Virginia.
Yep. And she hadn't seen you in a few years.
Right.
And so did she hear about your weight loss or came to see you?
So let me explain. About the time that I started my plan, my mother moved to Virginia with my stepfather. And it was about a year and a half. She'd been seeing me on Facebook and whatnot.
She knew pictures,
so she knew what was going on.
Right.
But when she came back up to visit for my birthday, my brother's...
Don't steal the thunder. Don't steal the thunder. We'll show people what happened here when she came to see your mom see you for the first time.
Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God!
So mom sees you. There's your wife, Terry, right? So mom sees you from 400 pounds. First time seeing you in person. Now you're 200 pounds, and she's startled.
Absolutely.
How did it make you feel?
It was overwhelming. It was very emotional. This whole journey has been very emotional. My mother's an RN.
Oh, geez.
And first off, losing my father several years ago, and then coming to this, she's been worried about me and my health, and to see me turn it around was just such a blessing for her. What a gift to give my life back to her.
Yeah. But then you're able to also have the gift of giving that to her, right? She has the gift of receiving it, but you have the gift of giving that to her after losing her husband, right?
Right.
So I'm assuming that's even more motivating as you continue your journey, right? So walk us through now what happens. You're down, you're trim, and now what's the next step? You start losing this weight. Do you have the urge to go back? A lot of folks, let's be honest, who lose that kind of weight, a lot put it back on. It's probably 50-50, right?
Correct.
So what were you thinking as you now getting to where you want to be? What kind of things do you have to be more attentive to stay there?
So it's all about sustainability. That's why I said in the beginning, it's about building habits, not about just losing the weight. I always say it matters less the route you get there. What matters most is what you do afterwards. And I made a promise to myself, I'm never going back. Never going back. Because the life I lived before was miserable. And it wasn't just because of the weight. It was because I wasn't taking care of myself.
The emotional part, when you're that heavy, walk us through some of the social things, the anxiety. There are other things you have when you're obese and don't have great self-esteem. What is that like on a day-to-day basis? Folks who aren't there, explain what that's like.
When you're super morbidly obese, it's a different life. I mean, I can't sit in things like those plastic chairs in the backyard without breaking them. You probably have no idea what it's like to go to a restaurant and have to ask for a table because you don't fit in a booth. Day to day, it was tough. I mean, even physical things, reaching your shoelaces. I mean, some of us deal with that, but it's sort of a stigma. You can't hide. You can't suck your gut in enough when you're 400 pounds and hide it. And I always felt like I stood out because I knew what it looked like, and I felt even more ashamed of myself.
So, next step now, we'll talk in our third segment about what's going to happen next and get into your overall meal plan. But how are you feeling right now?
I feel awesome. I really do. Because now that I have this opportunity to share my story and inspire people, it just gives me back more fuel to just keep going, keep my thing going, and setting an example for people.
It's sort of a sense of purpose now for you, right? To
Absolutely.
try to share your story, because you're not a licensed dietitian or nutritionist or a doctor.
Nor do I claim.
You're just a Joe guy, right?
Correct.
Joe average guy who lost a lot of weight, and you're trying to
Exactly.
share your story on how you did it for so many folks who struggle with that issue. So we're going to talk about how you're sustaining it and sort of the next chapter for you to get the word out to other people who are similarly situated, maybe not obese, but who want to lose weight. So we'll talk about those strategies.
Sure.
We're going to come back with more of the Stan Simpson Show and how Mike Harrington lost 200 pounds several years ago and be able to keep the weight off. We'll talk about his strategies for keeping it off, for sustaining it. Stick around. You're watching The Stan Simpson Show.